Hey guys, this is Mark Yo here again and welcome back to my channel. Last Saturday, I just released the full review on the latest Redmi 10 and you guys can check it out on how I felt about this device. And for this Redmi Note 10, I purposely buy it for the second time just to do this comparison. Of course, I also use this Redmi Note 10 for another 1 week as my daily driver before I can do this comparison, to be fair. So you guys must be wondering, why this comparison? The main reason is because of a tiny difference in price. The starting price for the Redmi 10 is 649 ringgit Malaysia, whereas the price for Redmi Note 10 is 699 ringgit Malaysia. So is it worth it to spend the extra 50 ringgit for the Note 10? We'll find out in this video. I got this Redmi Note 10 from Erica, a trusted seller in Johor Bahru, Malaysia. Fast and friendly service with humble attitude. So do check it out, her official Facebook page down below. First one to compare is definitely the back cover and frame for these two phones. They are both using plastic, okay, and plastic for the back cover and plastic for the frame. Overall size, the Note 10 is actually more compact due to the slightly smaller screen size, and the Note 10 is slightly shorter and narrower, but it's also much thinner at 8.3mm compared to 8.9mm on the Redmi 10. To me, the overall on the hand, I would prefer the Note 10 than the Redmi 10. But to be honest, the back cover of the Note 10 is glossy and more prone to fingerprint smudges. The back of the Redmi 10 is much smoother to touch. One thing to point out is that the design for the Redmi 10 has IP53 ratings, meaning it has certain degree of resistance against water splash and dust. Meanwhile, there's no IP ratings on the Redmi 10. One thing to point out is that the 3.5mm headphone jack location is at the bottom of the Redmi Note 10. Whereas for the Redmi 10, it's on top of the phone. For me, I would prefer the headphone jack to be at the bottom of the phone, which is more convenient and natural. Next is the screen. 6.5-inch LCD display on the Redmi 10. As compared to 6.43-inch AMOLED display on the Redmi Note 10. To be honest, the color reproduction on the Redmi 10 is not bad, but it's so much better on the Redmi Note 10. You get much better viewing experience at different angles, and the better color and deeper blacks on the Redmi Note 10. However, the Redmi 10 has an option to change to higher refresh rate at 90Hz, which makes scrolling apps and UI much more smoother than the 60Hz Redmi Note 10. To me, I would prefer to have higher refresh rate, but at the same time AMOLED screen for entry-level Xiaomi phones. Perhaps next year we'll get it. Redmi 10 on the left and Redmi Note 10 on the right. Another thing to point out is that the punch hole selfie camera on the Redmi 10 is much bigger than the Redmi Note 10 punch hole. Next is the performance. MediaTek Helio G88 on the Redmi 10 versus the Snapdragon 678 on the Redmi Note 10. And the Antutu scores for the Redmi Note 10 is higher, but to be honest, both phones also perform with similar performance. I didn't experience any lag whatsoever in day-to-day tasks. Gaming also no issues. Their performance is actually quite similar, which is good. Even for PUBG, they can both play at Smooth Ultra or HD high setting. For Genshin Impact, it's advisable to set a low graphic and 30 FPS setting to get a smoother gameplay. One more thing to add on is that the storage on the Redmi 10 uses eMMC 5.1, whereas the Redmi Note 10 uses UFS 2.2, which is faster in data transferring. In terms of cameras, both Redmi Note 10 and Redmi 10 has quad camera setup. 50 megapixel main shooter on the Redmi 10 and 48 megapixel main shooter on the Redmi Note 10. Otherwise, both of them also has 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens, 2 megapixel macro lens, and 2 megapixel depth sensor. The main lens and ultra-wide lens on the Redmi Note 10 are more consistent in daylight shot. The 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens on the Redmi 10 seem to be performing much better than the main shooter. But overall, I'll prefer the main shooter and ultra-wide lens on the Redmi Note 10. Macro lens on the Redmi 10 is slightly better as it produces more realistic photo color reproduction to the actual subject. As for night mode, it's better on the Redmi Note 10, which is much clearer. As for video recording, the Redmi 10 can shoot up to 1080p at 30 frames per second, whereas the Redmi Note 10 can shoot up to 4K at 30 fps. Although both have no stabilizer, but the video footage on the Redmi Note 10 is much better, less shaky. You guys can check it out, the video samples for both phones now. As for battery, both of these phones has 5000 mAh battery capacity, and both can easily get 8 to 9 hours of screen on time with almost 2 days of battery life. Even for gaming, their screen on time is also quite similar, around 5 to 6 hours depending the game that you play. Just that the Redmi Note 10 here can receive 33 watt of turbocharging, which only needs around 75 minutes to be fully charged, as compared to the 18 watt of the Redmi 10, okay, which need around 2.5 hours to be fully charged. Both phones also have dual stereo speakers. I find that the speakers on the Redmi Note 10 is much better in terms of loudness and bass. Let me know what you guys think. So there you go guys, my full in-depth comparison on the Redmi 10 versus the Redmi Note 10. And my money actually goes to the Redmi Note 10 for having AMOLED screen, better dual speakers, better cameras, much faster turbocharging, and so on. I think that Redmi Note 10 is a better buy. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Until then, take care, stay safe, and peace guys.